I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. If you've been watching the Poetry of Predicament for quite some time, actually for only about a week or so, you may have seen the earlier interview with Martina Niklis. This week, Martina is interviewing me, and that she is taking on the practice of doing interviews as transformational inner work for both the person doing the interviewing and the person being interviewed. Won't you join us in our interview, my interview, by Martina Niklis. There we go. Welcome back to the Poetry of Predicament podcast. I'm Dean Walker, your host for a few years now, and I'm particularly excited about this particular episode. I recently did an interview with Martina Niklis, and I had the pleasure of meeting Martina in 2019 in a trip to do a couple of workshops back to back in beautiful Mallorca, Spain. And so we both participated in both of those workshops, and the workshops were quite intensive, as the work of possibility management tends to be. Remarkable opportunity to meet new people and explore the depth of the work, and of course to meet Martina as a part of both of those courses. And in subsequent conversations, Martina's let me know that she's very interested in taking on this practice of doing interviews. I don't know if that's going to turn into a podcast for her or how she might offer those interviews, but it's clear that she's bringing this important level of inner work that she's doing, and that virtually everybody in those workshops were doing, and that of course we talked about at length in that earlier interview that you can find. I'll of course put the link to that in the show notes of this particular session. And I'm excited because I can really get a sense of when somebody starts to do this level of inner work, there's some benefits. There's some real benefits. What it can look like a lot of hard work, and for what? It can be a little bit difficult to understand what some of the benefits are of doing this inner work in preparation for, in expanding our capacities for facing this extraordinary world that we're living in right now. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce our host for today's interview, which is Martina Niklis. And I've, of course, should it also introduce the guest for today's interview. That's me. So thank you for joining us for this interview. And I am very pleased to once again introduce Martina Niklis. Martina, thank you so much for having me and us be a part of your introduction to the whole realm of doing interviews. And extraordinary interviews they will be, I am certain. So with that, I hand it off to you to introduce what it is you're up to with this project, with this exploration, these experiments of your first sets of interviews. And I'm just really pleased to be a part of your first experiment or experiments in this. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Dean. Your help is so precious for me. I remember about 3 months ago, I was talking to Anne-Chloé Destremo, a friend, and I told her about my idea of making interviews about talking to people, and she said, well, if it's about interviews, you have to talk to Dean Walker because he's the specialist for interviews. That's what she said. And my first thought was, yeah, sure, she's right. And I got in touch with you, and we had some very refreshing talks before. And last week you interviewed me, and my experience was that being interviewed is not a piece of cake. I was so nervous the whole time from the beginning to the end. It didn't stop. But the the most important thing you told me when the time was over and we were talking for some minutes, because you told me, Martina, you don't mm, be friendly to yourself and don't judge yourself about what you're saying and about how you are.
Mm.
And that really touches me. It still touches me, and I'm really motivated, and I'm glad that you give me that chance to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I want to say that this is an experiment. That whole thing is an experiment for me, and this experiment is about connecting, about creating intimacy while talking to another person. It's an experiment for me about letting enough time between words, between sentences, between thoughts. And yeah, it's, I don't know what will come out. And I'm glad that I can start with you. And I have some questions for you. And the first question is a double question. It's two questions in one.
Yeah.
And I'm I'm really interested to hear something about what your work is there in the USA, what you are doing there. And the second question is, are you nervous too?
All right. Okay. Well, let me just start with the second question. I'm not I'm not experiencing nervousness now, and I rarely do in my podcast interviews. I find that it's rare for me to feel nervous in conversation, especially in an interview setting, because it, as we'll talk about the importance of the space and how we look and see and feel in the conversation itself. In other words, what I'm paying attention to has a lot to do with whether I'm nervous or not. And if my attention is with warm curiosity on the other person, and I love that you brought up intimacy, if it's on the experience of intimacy, how present am I to how we are relating,
Mm.
then there's little or no nervousness. If I'm trying to impress somebody or I'm trying to make a point and they are disagreeing with it, and if there's that kind of power dynamic or a kind of heady
Mm.
interaction, there can be nervousness, if especially if I think I'm looking bad or my image is not good in this moment and so on. Those are the things that have me feel nervous
Mm.
sometimes. So probably enough on that for the moment. And your other question about what is this work that I'm doing, thank you for asking. I'm, I'm always happy to share. Um, my work is really comes from when I was a child. I saw some television programs that were very, very important to me from a man named Jacques Cousteau, a Frenchman who brought the beauty of the oceans to
Mhm.
people on TV.
Yeah.
And I had never seen anything like that. I'm moved right now just telling you this. It's just so deep in my system how much he introduced me to loving life, and through my experience of the ocean that he brought to all of us. And I knew from those specials that one part of those specials was he would say, look at this beauty, and then also look right next to it is damage being done by human beings on a
Mm.
very big scale. If this doesn't stop, we will be damaging this entire area. Like that. He would have that kind of message almost every show.
Mhm.
What I saw then as a very young boy is that I was moved to tears by the beauty and by his warning. And none of the adults were moved by the warning. None.
Mm.
I knew from that age that we were going to kill this planet, because
Wow.
there is no adult that is truly addressing what he's talking about. So
Mm.
then I went through a number of years of, my started my practice, my internal practices quite soon after that, meditation and connecting with the earth and different lineages of personal practices, that includes, after a number of years, transformational work like possibility management. But I did all of that by working in the corporate world and working around the world, even with youth programs or community programs, and then corporate work and so on. And so I became a part of the destructive human activity that I was so concerned about.
Mm.
So about 8 years ago, I got a very bold wake up call that everything that I was fearing as a child has come full cycle, and that we are literally in a predicament where we don't have problems, we have predicaments, which means there are no solutions.
Mhm.
And so I wrote a book about that, and have been working on processing my complicity, my part in this destruction that we're doing.
Mhm.
And part of that was to create a body of work. I wrote the book The Impossible Conversation, about that, about exactly what I'm introducing here. And the body of work is a website called Living Resilience, and a number of learning opportunities and online support gatherings and so on, that is called Deep Academy, in which people can find others where it's safe to have this conversation,
Mhm.
because these conversations are still not okay to have. Most people don't want to hear about it. They don't want to
Mhm.
think about it. They for sure don't want to feel it. And so it is my offering in the face of these predicaments is to, the short way of saying it is, I offer transformative resources and support to people who are bravely facing human caused collapse of earth and human systems. So it's a relatively small number of people on the planet who are bravely facing all that right now. So it's a small audience, like it's a relatively small audience that does the possibility management work. It is very intense. and it is very deep and is very powerful. And these are things that most of the world are still resisting. It's still a big challenge for people to engage with truly seeing the world for what it is, and to then look at exploring other possibilities, other ways of being, other ways of presencing, other ways of relating in the face of those predicaments. It's a big challenge. So there's a limited number of people so far who are ready for that challenge. So thanks for asking that.
Thank you, Dean. Wow. I was wondering when you were talking about that Deep Academy. I thought that's the name of the Deep Academy. How did you find that name? Because it's because when I heard that, I was thinking about the depth of the ocean and this connection to the movies that you've seen as a child.
Yeah.
And the ocean as something that's still very mystery. We don't know very much what's going on down there, and it's it's a big secret. And yeah, that's what I was connecting in my head. But how did you find that name?
Yeah. Oh, it's a beautiful question. Thank you. I love the way you asked that, because the ocean is obviously deep, and this is a blue planet. This is an ocean planet. It is not as much a land planet as we like to think. And it does have many mysteries. And so I just love that. Thank you. Deep Academy came about really last year, when I was adjusting my expression of this work from writing a second book and a workbook that was going to go with it. And I just saw, people aren't reading whole books much anymore. I don't think there's a lot of impact. I may end up writing those and I may not. I've got lots of chapters waiting in the desk somewhere. What I saw was it really needs to happen online, and it has to be video, and it has to be like curated content, carefully bringing together different pieces of content from people who have something substantial to say, including my own contribution as well. And that became the idea of an academy, which is, people could then choose the line of learning that is important to them. So there are choices of how people can, what they can choose to study, and hopefully they're doing it together with someone else or with a small group. I'm just praying that that's the way this learning, this experiencing happens. And the deep part came from my fairly substantial connection with and involvement with deep adaptation, which is the name of a program, a name of a concept that was created by Professor Jem Bendell in England a couple of years ago, as he is a professor of sustainability leadership. In other words, speaking with organizations and corporations and so on about how to have our human paradigm, how to have it be sustainable. And he had a radical moment for himself when he came to the realization that there's nothing sustainable about this system. And that's something, when that's your livelihood, that's your expertise. And he declared that. He wrote a paper that's now very, very famous. So, people, I'm happy to put the connections in the show notes of, Jem's organization and Facebook
Yeah.
presence and so on.
Yes.
But Deep Academy came out of that because I really appreciated his use of deep for adaptation. I don't resonate with the notion of adaptation so much. It's not what my work is about. I honor that that's how he frames his work. So deep is the level that I'm wanting to work on and share with people. And academy is the just the way of saying, here's a place where you can find the content that you may serve your path.
Mhm.
So that's how I came up with it.
Mhm.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Um, I'm very interested in my. It has to do with what I want to do, because the next question is about when we talked last week. You made up a space for me that was very big, and very friendly and big, relaxed somehow. And on the other side, it was very focused. And another friend told me some days before, there is one animal that can be both together, focused and relaxed, and it is the cat. I don't know if you knew that. A cat can be relaxed and focused at the same time. And when we were doing this interview after that, I was thinking about that quality of making a big space and at the same time be very focused and very concentrated. And I like that very much, and I appreciate how you did that. And I want to learn that.
Oh, nice.
So
nice.
I'm interested to hear more about how do you, the first question, why are you so interested in people? How did it come that you want to know what opinion they have, what answers they have to your question? What in you is burning that you want to know what people think and have to say? Can you tell us something about that?
Wow, I'm very moved by your question. I don't know why, but it's literally moving me. Thank you so much for that. I hope this is not an upsetting answer for people who are watching. I don't have an easy, quick, kind of sweet answer for you. It is not that I so love people that all I want to do is find out how each person thinks and feels and how life is. I have been struggling for a number of years now to find aspects of humanity as a whole to love. I'm seeing us kill this planet, and we're killing between 150 and 200 species a day, and have been for years now, in our unconscious parade forward in this business as usual world. So it's difficult for me to say, oh, I just love people. No, there's a lot of me, there are parts of me that really don't love people at all. With that said, I am deeply thankful for the practices that I've been able to be a part of, and the lineages of learning and experiencing and experimenting, like this possibility management stuff we talk about, and many others, because they've given me access to a different way to be alive, to reference what is true for me in this moment. How shall I respond? What's real for me now that I've heard Martina's question? How does it land inside. I keep pointing here. This is it's sometimes called the implicit senses or the implicit system in a human body. And it occurs here. And this is the main focus of my work in this deep academy stuff. When we start to talk about embodied studies or embodied, experience, this is where it shows up for me. So I have come close to dying a number of times. In addition to those years and years of practices that have given me the ability to map out and distinguish this implicit system. It is here that I look to answer your question truthfully. And what has me want to do these interviews and to offer these kinds of work that I do is that I am deeply committed to reconnecting with deeper self, with other people, with earth, and with soul. Because what I discovered in writing the book and in really looking at this predicament is that what got us here is we've disconnected. So if I am choosing to reconnect as much as I can before the last breath I take, then whatever I can do to be with others, sharing what I'm doing in reconnecting in that moment, and invite them, whether they're aware of it or not, to reconnect in some significant way in the middle of our conversation. You mentioned the word intimacy back at the beginning. For me, this is real intimacy. Like when I pause right now, it is so easy to touch. It's just right. It's right, very present, thanks to your space and my space in this conversation. I feel that we are both reconnecting with the web of life itself, with each other a bit, with our deeper selves a bit. That's my experience in this moment right now. It is that has me do these interviews. It's that through learning how to hold a space that is invitational, in which the person does not feel threatened, feel like they have to impress anybody. We can come out of our heads and we can connect. So again, whether someone else is conscious of that or aware of that or not, and it's not something I try and force them to do. I just try to invite it. I often call it inviting the waves. The waves that in each of us, in those implicit systems, that's the normal way that implicit system does what it does. I hope that was a clear answer, and I hope for the people who wanted a simple answer like, well, I just love people and I'd love to talk with them. No, not really.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That leads me to dive a little bit deeper into that question, what is a good interview? And you in part times you already gave the answer. My experience last week when you were talking to me, and when I was watching that interview later, some days later when you sent it, I I thought the content, what we were talking about, the content was not so special. It was not the content. It was, and you also said that there could be some people that say, "Oh, come on, what are you talking about? Come over," or I don't know. And I had the same impression, but I was really astonished and surprised because I saw myself with eyes of love. I saw this woman that was nervous. I saw how nervous I was. I saw later how I was trying to give right answer, good answers, intelligent answers, whatever answers, conscious answers. And I saw there was another, like two lines. There was this content line and there was another line, and this other line was the main line. This was the important thing, was what happened in this space. And can you tell a little bit more about what makes a good interview? What is this content, and what is this other line for you? What is this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I know you understood that.
Sure.
Can you tell us more about that, how you see it?
Martina, you are going to be really, really good at this. You're already really good at this. I'm so excited to be in this interview with you. It's so great.
Thank you.
In that disconnection that I was talking about, that got us here, all of us, to some degree or another, have disconnected from the primary sources of meaning and relationship in life: deeper self, other people, earth, and soul. The cost of that disconnection is impossible for me to overstate. It is huge. One of the biggest costs of disconnecting from other people and from ourselves is trust. We kill trust. Also intimacy, by the way. We've mentioned that a few times, but we kill intimacy, we kill trust when we disconnect from deeper self and from others. And obviously, the same can be said for earth and soul, but let's keep it as simple as we can. You mentioned, I love the way you just said that. There were two levels, and the content really didn't matter much. And not to be insulting or anything, but really, the words and the content of the words were far less important than this other line, you called it, another line underneath. I think that's a beautiful way to say it. And what makes a good interview? Truthfully, all an interview is an interaction between two people. How many interactions with people do we have in a day? If we're talking about normal interviews for TV news or on 1,000 different talk shows and YouTube channels, and if we're talking about the regular world interviews, it's blah, 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 content, blah, 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 content. And it's wrapped up in two people who are disconnected, sharing content, blah, 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 blah. And so, oh my God, it's just deadening. We have no shortage of content. In fact, we are so flooded with content in this world. It's killing us. It is part of what is killing us. So what makes a good interview here in this way of framing it
Mhm.
is to trust that second lower line you were describing.
Mhm.
And you might use different words, but I think you're describing when I kept doing this.
Mhm.
When I'm referencing not how strong is the content, how accurate are the words, how much am I focusing on the words? No. I'm relating and connecting as much as I can from this implicit system. And that is what's generating the truth of, or not, of what's being shared. And it's behind the words. So the words matter still a little, but far more important is the state of being that we're generating and sharing, each best we can.
Mhm.
Some days I do that really well. And some days I'm kind of tied up like a little ball and I've got my opinions and I've got grumpy. But what makes a good interview is you just shared that in like 1 minute. You said, yeah, it was happening on this line with the words, and it didn't matter much. And this line underneath it seemed like this was rich, and this is where it was opening up. And so different words, but yeah, what makes a good interview is how, in this context, is how connected we both or either of us is to this implicit system at the core of us, and that we are allowing what is emerging from that core to be our presence, to inform what do I want to ask now? How would I like to respond to that question?
Mhm.
That ends up being more often than not beautiful.
Mhm. Thank you. I've I've another I have another question about that, and because um, I've seen to what person you were talking. I've watched some interviews what you did with people, and I had the impression that um, there was there was always something like a sympathy is it the right word? So you were liking the person and the person liked you, and also we know each other from the lab. We had some talks, and we like each other. We are not, you're not dangerous for me, and I hope that I'm not dangerous for you, although you're a totally other culture. You're American and I'm German, and that is a little explosive, could be explosive, but the connection is friendly. We have a friendly connection, and I was wondering if you ever did interviews with people that you thought before they could be dangerous, or uh, perhaps people thought, oh, I'm not sure if I want to talk to you because I'm not sure what you're doing there, and what will be, and what you will ask me. And how can this connection look like when you are talking to people that are, I use this word, dangerous? Did you
Right.
do that before, and what is your experience with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I I do have a whole, perhaps in a later interview we can go in depth
Mhm.
into the exploration of truly dangerous,
Yeah.
because there is a truly dangerous part of being alive and engaged in the world in these times. And I'm talking seriously, no kidding, dangerous. Like life is at stake, dangerous. So I'm going to just put that aside. I know that that's not what you're saying and asking about, but I think it would be an interesting and good conversation to have some other time.
Yeah, yeah.
When you talk about dangerous in this context, I'm hearing if there's a possibility that the person could have a big disagreement with, or big judgments about, or energetically quite abrupt and even energetically violent ways of presencing in the conversation that are meant to demean me, or if I'm doing this behavior, I'm trying to demean someone else, or make them small, or make my point far more important than them at the cost of them. Those I think are the kind of things that you might be talking about dangerous
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
And it's been very, very rare, because I don't make a point of inviting people to podcast interviews who are in that kind of energetically violent disagreement with the work that I'm doing, or me with theirs.
Mhm.
With that said, I've had many what I've come to call impossible conversations,
Mhm.
based on the name of my book. I've had many conversations with people who are full on environmental or climate change deniers.
Mhm.
That are completely and utterly committed to the continuation and the growth of the human business as usual paradigm that is, in my judgment, killing the planet. I have had conversations with these people very different than myself. Fundamentalist Christians oftentimes are very different than me. I am very far from that. And the best thing I know to do, if I really want to connect, is to connect using my best ability to generate authentic, warm curiosity.
Mhm. Yeah.
And if I'm up to doing that in that day and in that session, great, because I'm pretty good at it.
Mhm.
I'm also pretty good at setting aside, letting go of my righteousness about how we're killing the planet and how we're in a predicament, and that
Mhm.
we don't have any collective will to stop killing the planet. These are big opinions I have. They're actually stronger than that. They're very strong experiences I have. But I have the ability to literally pick them up and set them aside. I
Yeah.
have no investment that I'm going to save the world or do the world any favor if I'm speaking with someone who's a climate change denier by trying to convince them of something.
Mhm.
We're long past that.
Mhm.
So if they feel no threat from me, that I'm going to pound on them with the facts and the figures and the no, killing the earth, blah, blah, blah. If they feel safe from, they won't be hit over the head. And if they feel an authentic, warm curiosity about how is life for you? What matters most to you? I'm so curious, and could you tell me, when you look out at the world from your place, what are you concerned about? What are your concerns? And that seems to lower the danger level
Yeah.
immediately.
Mhm.
Um, I hope that's a
Mhm.
satisfactory response.
Mhm. That's for me what you just said is like an evidence for that second line, for that what we were talking about,
Yeah.
because no matter whom you are talking to, it doesn't play a role whom you are talking to, because when when you have that second line, that will to connect, and that will to really see, and that will to really understand who is sitting there and what is this person thinking and feeling, then it doesn't matter so much if he is a, I don't know, if he is green or red.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, Dean. This is the end of the interview. I don't have prepared something for the end. No. It's. I'm feeling like I was, I was going underwater with you. And what is the word for being underwater? Um, um, Being when you cannot breathe. This swimming underwater.
Uh-huh.
We were swimming underwater, and now somehow suddenly I came up, and it's over, and I don't know what to say. But I know one thing that I want to say, and this is thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for your, yeah, being together with me, and jumping on that second line with me again after 1 week. And yeah, I'm I'm glad. I'm just glad. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you're certainly welcome. And I thank you as well. It's been a lovely conversation and time together. And before you said what you just said, you said, well, this is the end of the interview and I don't know what to say. But then you said what you just said, which
Mhm.
was, you returned us, you kind of mapped out a landing area.
Mhm.
You gave us a little tour of how it was for you.
Mhm.
How this conversation went for you is that you experienced like going on this journey, this underwater swimming together. And then all of a sudden at the end, the time was gone, and you're back out, and it was air again instead of water, and so on. And you brought us to reminding us about that second line, that those implicit senses, that implicit system, that where the real interview is happening, where the real intimacy is happening, where the real exchange is happening.
Mhm.
And so you gave us a little map, and really more importantly for folks who are watching this, who aren't so familiar, that don't share the experiences that we have of this type of deeper work, or this kind of quick deep dive into intimacy and then back out, and then let's talk about what it was like. And so we have that. But many people don't. So you did what was perfect to do, is you gave us all a way to make sense of this. and to land us in a way that we can now look back as soon as we're done with this interview, and as soon as they're done watching, they can hopefully take a deep breath and look at, okay, is there any part of that lower line that I can take into my day? That was a good orientation, a good landing, a good mapping landing place that you gave us all. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. It's good to be connected with what I'm feeling and just say that and not say something. So thank you for diving with me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for watching another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance, www.livingresilience.net. Music today from Michael Hedges, as always, and also Port Blue Into the Sea. Also available on our website, www.livingresilience.net, is a wide array of articles, online learning series, arranging group and individual resilience coaching, and sign up for our every other Tuesday free support group that we call Safe Circle Calls.